You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I am your host, Steph, and today I'm going to be previewing the 49ers defense going up against the Seahawks offense. Schedule's a little different this week because it's a Thursday night game this week for the 49ers, and so I'm going to be doing my defense preview today on Tuesday, and tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm going to be bringing you guys the offense preview for this team. But without further ado, let's just jump right in because we're on a short week. The practice reports are if they were to have practiced on Monday. There was a practice for the 49ers today. I'm not sure if the Seahawks practiced at all. I know for the 49ers, it was a very light practice. I haven't heard anything about an injury report for the Seahawks today, so I'm wondering if they even held a practice. So for the Seahawks, this report is from yesterday. And like I said, it's not an actual practice that took place. It was more of a hypothetical. If they were to have practiced, this is what the participation would have been like. So for them, no practice was running back DJ Dallas with an ankle injury, defensive end Shelby Harris with an illness, safety Ryan Neal with a knee injury, nose tackle Al Woods with an Achilles, and limited was their running back Kenneth Walker Jr., very talented player. He missed last week against the Carolina Panthers, and they were definitely missing him. He's become a huge part of their offense. I would assume the fact that he's limited this early in the week would seem to indicate that he is on track to play for Thursday, but we'll take a look at it tomorrow once again. And finally, safety Joey Blount is also limited with a back injury. And for the 49ers, in addition to this, we got to talk about some injuries because we always got to talk about some injuries with the 49ers. We can't have nice things. Deebo Samuel, you guys saw him leave the game Sunday on a cart. It was very scary. However, the 49ers did avoid worst case scenario, and he suffered an MCL sprain and an ankle sprain. And today, Kyle Shanahan said he is set to miss 3-ish weeks, which would put him around week 17 to return. However, if I'm the 49ers and it's week 17 and the 2 seed is not in play, I would simply rest Deebo and probably a few other players. But of course, I have a feeling that the 2 seed will still be in play. So Deebo Samuel could be in line to return as soon as week 17 against the Cardinals. Now, Brock Purdy also dealing with an injury. He is day-to-day with an oblique injury that he suffered in the second quarter of Sunday's game. You guys know he continued playing after that injury. It isn't clear whether... Well, Kyle Shanahan said it isn't clear whether Brock Purdy will play Thursday, but he did say it's a pain tolerance issue and not something that can worsen if he were to play. So that's a great sign. I see no reason why he would not play. I have a feeling that this is just Kyle Shanahan doing Shanahan things and wanting to force the Seahawks to have to prepare for 2 quarterbacks in this game just for the off chance that Brock Purdy does not play. But you and me know, we know that Brock Purdy is likely going to be playing on Thursday. And Kevin Givens, MCL sprain, out a few weeks. So he did not practice today. He won't be practicing for a while. And cornerback Dante Johnson, the team announced, tore his ACL. I don't have him on the list because he was a practice squad player that they elevated for this game. Unfortunately, though, he tore his ACL. I know the running jokes with Dante Johnson that, he's always on this team. And, I have come to like Dante Johnson quite a bit. He's like a very reliable veteran. And so it's a bummer, especially going into this like playoff stretch here coming up, that Dante Johnson won't be available for this team. And also with Kevin Givens and Hassan Ridgeway set to miss multiple weeks with their injuries. Kevin Givens dealing with an MCL sprain, and Hassan Ridgeway, as had been reported the previous week, he's dealing with a pec injury. So those two guys are going to be missing multiple weeks. Javon Kinlaw's still out. So, they had to sign a defensive lineman for the interior. They signed Mike Dwumfor to the team's practice squad. And he might get elevated for Thursday's game just because they're so thin at the interior of their defensive line. And of course, guys that I didn't put on this list here, also Jimmy Garoppolo, Tarvarius Moore, and Hassan Ridgeway, because those guys are never going to be those guys are not going to be practicing for a few weeks with their injuries. So it's assumed they're not going to be playing. So Deebo Samuel, Kevin Givens, Samuel Womack as well, not practicing. Womack is in the concussion protocol. Brock Purdy, limited with oblique and rib injury. All right, let's look at the Seahawks stats. All right, I've looked up their rankings. Let's set the stage for this preview. Now, let's talk about it. Because the Seahawks offense is not that bad. They really aren't. And as seen here in this slide, they are first in completion percentage. So credit to Geno Smith. All right, he is completing 71.33% of his passes. That's really good. That's best in the NFL. The Seahawks offense are 6th in points per game, 6th in touchdowns per game, 8th in third down conversion percentage, 9th in passing yards per game, 10th in average scoring margin, 13th in yards per game, 20th in QB sacked percentage. And that's good because the 49ers did not get any sacks on Tom Brady and the Bucs last week. So the fact that the Seahawks are 20th in QB sacked percentage, it would tell you that there's going to be an opportunity for Geno Smith to get sacked in this game. The Seahawks are 21st in average rushing yards per game, 23rd in red zone scoring percentage. That's counting touchdowns only. 24th in penalties per game, 26th in giveaways per game, and 32nd, dead last, in average time of possession. Couple notes here. So the average scoring margin, yes, they are 10th on the season, but in the last 3 weeks, they have fallen to 19th in that span. In the last 3 weeks, they would rank 19th in average scoring margin. And to be that bad in time of possession, that seems like a recipe that the 49ers offense would sure love. And finally, the rushing yards per game, they average 67 rushing yards per game. The 49ers, as we know, wait. Sorry. Rush yards. No, the 49ers defense is limiting teams and their rushing. And I'll talk about that more in a bit. They are averaging 111 average rushing yards per game. So yeah, this is what we're looking at for the week for the Seahawks offense. Let's move on to the battle of the trenches. Now, the Seahawks offensive line, it's better at pass blocking than run blocking, but overall, it's pretty middle of the pack. The line ranks 13th in PFF pass blocking grade this season, despite starting a pair of rookie tackles, 2 very talented rookie tackles. So Seattle's run game generated just 24 yards before contact a couple weeks ago against the Rams on 21 carries, and they rank 17th overall by PFF. Last time that the 49ers and the Seahawks played, this is what their offensive line looked like. So their left tackle, Charles Cross, allowed 1 pressure and 1 hurry. Their left guard, Damian Lewis, had a clean slate. He did not allow any pressures, no QB hits, nothing. Clean slate for him. He did good. Their center, Austin Blythe, allowed 1 pressure, 1 hurry, and he also had a penalty. Their right guard, Gabe Jackson, probably his worst game of the season from what I saw. 6 pressures, 3 hurries, 2 quarterback hits, and 1 sack allowed for Gabe Jackson. And finally, the right tackle, Abraham Lewis, 2 pressures, 1 hurry, and a quarterback hit. And he also had 2 penalties. So there's some opportunity here. I mean, overall, the Seattle's offensive line did pretty well against the 49ers in week 2, but as you see, there is some room for the 49ers defense to work here, especially if Gabe Jackson has anywhere near the type of performance that he did in week 2, giving up the 6 pressures. So I think it's going to be a better game for the defensive line than it was last week. I think they're going to be able to get some pressure on Geno Smith. We'll talk more about Geno Smith in a bit. Let's talk about the Seahawks tight ends. So they have Noah Fant, who they got in exchange for in the Russell Wilson trade. They ended up getting Noah Fant from the Denver Broncos as part of that deal. So he hasn't been with the team that long. Certainly in week 2 against the Niners, when he went for 2 catches and 11 yards, he didn't have that much time to kind of start gelling with this Seattle team in this offense quite yet. But I still would not expect a very large role for Noah Fant in this game. Last week, he didn't have any catches. That was the first time this season he went catchless against the Panthers. And his last 2 weeks, he's been blocking at a higher rate than he had before this season. In week 13, he blocked nearly 18% of the time. And in week 14, last week, he was blocking nearly 22% of the time. So not as involved as tight ends have been in the past in this Seattle offense. And the 49ers defense have been limiting opposing tight ends to an average of just 35 yards a game. So all the more reason to not expect Noah Fant to be a huge factor in this one. They also have Will Dissly, who is good for about 1 to 2 catches a game. But again, just not picturing a big showing for the tight ends in this game. Now let's talk about the wide receivers, because that's kind of who helps this offense out a lot. Of course, DK Metcalf, one of the better receivers in the game, and Tyler Lockett, who, as we know, through all the years that the 49ers have played the Seahawks, can be very lethal in this offense. So DK Metcalf, let's talk about him first. For the people watching on YouTube, you will see on the left here is how he did against the Saints. Now, why did I pick this game? Because I think the Saints are one of the tougher defenses that the Seahawks faced this season, much like, the 49ers. They gave him a good test as well. So just as a point of reference, against the Saints, he had 5 receptions, 88 yards, and a touchdown. So 88 yards, I think you'd be happy to have anything under 100 yards when it comes to Metcalf, because, he often gets over 100 yards and more than 5 catches. So I feel like that was a pretty good for the Saints defense in that game. I believe that, I forgot what week that was, but it was earlier in the season. And a couple weeks ago against the Rams, he had 8 receptions, 127 yards, and a touchdown. So this is kind of like the duality of DK Metcalf. He is just as capable of being a threat on this offense. He averages 2.2 yards of separation this season. That's actually the 8th lowest among qualifying receivers. But he gets an average of 12 average targeted air yards every time he is targeted. So, he gets targeted pretty far beyond the sticks. And we should see a lot of DK Metcalf in this game. Now, as far as Tyler Lockett, he averages on average 11.2 targeted air yards when he's targeted. I don't know how to say that. Like, say that in a sentence. When he is targeted, he is he averages 11.2 air yards. Does that make sense? Okay. Because the way I wrote it down, it just did not make sense. Sorry. So, okay, for Tyler Lockett, for those of you watching on video, I have it here too. How he did against the Saints. He also had 5 receptions, but he had 104 yards and he had 2 touchdowns. So still was able to get a lot of production from either one of their receivers. And this time it was Tyler Lockett against the Saints. But against the Rams last week, he also had a good game. 2 weeks ago, he had 9 receptions, 128 yards, and a touchdown. So, both of these guys can be dangerous. I think the big key for the defense is stopping this offense at the source, which is Geno Smith, because they pass the ball a lot. And, if he's not able to get it to the receivers, they're going to have a hard time moving the ball, especially with the way that the 49ers defend the run. I'm really not worried about Kenneth Walker, going off. But we'll just have to wait and see. And Lockett, he has the 5th most touchdowns among pass catchers this season with 8 touchdowns. I was a little surprised by that. But it just goes to show how he is still very much involved in this offense. Still very effective. And of course, they have Marcus Goodwin as well, who we know can be a bit of a speedster in the time that he's been with the 49ers, but he doesn't have that large of a role, so left him out of the preview. But anyway, look, we know that with Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, this is going to be a tough challenge for the corners, all right? Now, I don't really worry about Charvarius Ward. I don't know about you guys, but I just don't worry about him. He's solid. He's really good. But Deommodore Lenoir, on the other hand, is a guy that, I kind of wonder. Because his defense is so good, I don't think it's a stretch to say Lenoir is the weakest link on this defense. That being said, this defense is just very good, so it's not so much a reflection of Lenoir, but teams are going to want to, target Lenoir as much as possible. Against Miami, I thought he did pretty well. He was targeted 5 times, only allowed a catch, 19 yards. He also had the interception and allowed a passer rating of just 3.3. Last week against Tampa Bay, he was targeted 8 times in his coverage, allowed 4 catches, only 26 yards. And he also had a pass breakup, allowed a passer rating of 57.3. So I feel like Lenoir is doing just fine. I mean, these last 2 weeks were both a huge test for Lenoir in the secondary, and I thought he's really coming along, I think. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin definitely, and Julio Jones, definitely test, but I think he passed, as well as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So he's coming along. He's looking good. So I don't think I'm choosing not to worry about Deommodore Lenoir this week, because there's so many dogs on this defense that I think he's going to be just fine. The safeties help these guys out as well. So I'm not worried about Lenoir in the least bit. Now, let's talk about the Seahawks running back. He's a rookie, Ken Walker Jr. Assuming he's able to play, it seems like he will be able to play because he's limited this early in the week. That is usually a good sign. He did miss last week. So I wanted to talk about Kenneth Walker, because going up against Tampa Bay, and the reason that I bring this one up is because Tampa Bay is seen as a tough defense. I know the 49ers kind of demolished them, but this season they've been one of the better defenses in the league. And so I just wanted to see how the Seahawks, and in particular Kenneth Walker, did against Tampa Bay. So here was his stat line: 10 carries, 17 rush yards, 0 touchdowns. I can imagine a very similar stat line against the 49ers in this game, just because the 49ers have been able to stifle every running back pretty much that they have faced. And you can see, so in week 2 against the Niners, he hadn't really gotten a starting role yet, because he was playing behind, what's his name? They had another running back earlier in the season, and I'm blanking on his name. But as soon as he went down with an injury, Kenneth Walker has kind of taken over from there. So that's why in week 2 he only had 4 carries for 10 yards. He just wasn't getting the opportunities. But since week 4 on, he's basically had 10 carries or more in every game. And from week 6 to week 9, he was handling at least 20 carries a game, which is a huge timeshare of carries for Kenneth Walker. And these last couple weeks, he hasn't had as much involvement. Like against Tampa Bay in week 10, he only had 10 carries, as I mentioned. And then against the Raiders the following week, he had 14 carries. So his opportunities have taken a step back. His carry count has taken a step back. I'm not sure why that is, but I know that would favor the 49ers. If the Seahawks are one-dimensional, they will take that all day. You just made their job a little bit easier. Just stop Geno Smith, and they would gladly just have one thing to worry about. So, Kenneth Walker. Another thing I wanted to mention. So, the 49ers defense is the best run defense in the entire league. It's not even a debate. The 49ers are allowing their opponents to rush for 75.1 yards per game. That's it. In their last 3 games, they've been even better. In their last 3 games, they're allowing an average of 55 rushing yards per game. And both of those are best in the league, both for the season and within the last 3 games. So I think it's going to be tough sledding for Kenneth Walker if he is able to play. And of course, I feel good about what this defense is able to do in forcing teams to become one-dimensional and try to pass it. Now, finally, let's talk about Geno Smith, because after all, he is the guy who passes it. So Geno Smith, he has one of the top completion percentages of the season. I already mentioned that. He has a 3rd highest passer rating this season. His time to throw, one noted here, is his time to throw is a little slower than the guys we've been facing as of late. So Andy Dalton and Tua were both 2.6, and then Tom Brady was like 2.4, I believe, something like that. So these last 3 weeks, the 49ers have had the tough task of dealing with quarterbacks who get the ball out quick. Geno Smith gets it out a little bit slower than that. So that should give the defensive line some more opportunities to get to Geno Smith to affect the pocket, because he's not getting the ball out as quickly as some of those other guys. But look at here. I mean, he's pretty accurate and has a lot of success throwing downfield. Again, passer rating of 106.8 on the season, 71.5 completion percentage. He's thrown 25 touchdowns compared to 8 interceptions. That's a really good touchdown interception ratio there. And he's just been very efficient for this Seattle team. And it's part of the reason why they've been able to kind of have a resurgence post Russell Wilson, because Geno Smith is exactly what they've been looking for in terms of how they like to operate their offense. And he's doing it for them. But now, I also wanted to point out how he played last week, because last week against the Panthers was not his greatest performance. He was 21 of 36, 264 yards. He did have 3 touchdowns, but he also had 2 interceptions. And that was a pretty important game for the Seahawks. You know, they're losing grip of the NFC West. I mean, they already lost the NFC West a couple weeks ago, but, you know, any win would help them out in trying to get back up there, and they just haven't been able to claw their way out. The 49ers have just been too good, and because they're on their 6-game win streak, it's been hard for the Seahawks to climb back up to the top of the NFC West. It's very unlikely to happen. In week 2 against the 49ers, Geno Smith was 24 of 30, 197 yards, 0 touchdowns, and an interception. So despite throwing the ball 30 times, he did not get over 200 yards, and he did not have any touchdowns, but he did have the interception. And I feel like we might see a similar performance in this game. I mean, maybe he gets a touchdown this week. I don't know, but I don't think he's going to be able to do much against his defense because they've just been so good, and they've been able to impose their will on a lot of quarterbacks in these last few weeks. And I can't imagine Geno Smith is going to be the one to turn that trend for this team. So I like this for the 49ers. And I think, like I said, Geno Smith probably has a similar performance to that of week 2 when he played against the Niners last. This is going to be a tough one. But look, here are my keys of the game for the defense. Simply, they have to force turnovers. In week 2, the 49ers defense got a fumble and they got 2 interceptions. So they're going to need to do that once again. Also, this offense, this Seahawks offense, they're 26th in giveaways per game. So the 49ers have to capitalize on these opportunities. They have to capitalize on these opportunities, get turnovers, get the ball to your offense, and that would help them win the time of possession. In week 2, the 49ers held the ball 38 minutes compared to the Seahawks 21 minutes. And as I mentioned, the Seahawks are 32nd, dead last in average time of possession. So it seems like the 49ers would have a good chance of winning the time of possession here again. That would be an ideal situation. Get the ball out of the Seahawks' hands, out of Geno Smith's hands, and rest your defense. They deserve it. And finally, play a mistake-free game. The Seahawks committed 10 penalties for 106 yards when these two teams met in week 2. A similar type of performance would be great, but 49ers simply just have to make sure that they're not on the wrong side of mistakes, and don't shoot yourself in the foot, pretty much, because we know how those games in Seattle, hostile environment, crowd is very loud. We know how that can go, and we know also how that can snowball in these types of games. It's a division game after all, so I think it is going to be hard fought because really the NFC West is between the Niners and the Seahawks. So I think the Seahawks are going to give it their best effort. But if the 49ers do these 3 things, force turnovers, win time of possession, and play a mistake-free game, I think the 49ers are going to come out of there with a win. All right, guys, that's all for my defense preview today. Tune in tomorrow for my 49ers offense preview, and we'll talk plenty about Brock Purdy and how he can beat the Seahawks defense in this one. But I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Make sure you like this video if you have not yet. Appreciate all the love. Make sure you subscribe if you have not yet. Have a good rest of your guys' evening. Peace.